All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for this workshop on growing the capacity of your local group. My name is Don Hall. I'm the Executive Director of Transition US, and I'm going to kick things off tonight with a presentation on the 5 stages of transition. And I'll be followed by some illustrious company. Tobin McKee from Cooperation Humboldt on their organizational structure and distributed leadership. Borucki and Linda Currie of Transition Berkeley on meaningful partnerships and funding. And Sari, Steuber and Martin Pepper of Transition Town Media on their approach to strategic planning. And all of that will be followed by some Q&A and breakout discussions on each of these topics. So I'm just going to jump right in here with the first presentation on the 5 stages of transition. And the 5 stages of transition are starting out, deepening, connecting, building, and daring to dream. And together, they really comprise a graduated pathway for anyone, whether you're doing transition or something else, to start a local social change initiative from scratch with no resources, no connections, no nothing, and build it up into something that has the potential to have a really substantial impact. Not just on our own local communities, but even beyond. So the 5 stages of transition came from transition movement founder Rob Hopkins in his 2011 book, The Transition Companion. And this book was mostly overlooked at the time, but for some reason it fascinated me, and I became even more deeply fascinated when I started to see how it connected and reflected and related to the work that I was doing as a local organizer in Sarasota, Florida. That this wasn't just a theory, but this was actually a description of how change happens in this particular way. And Rob said about it that the journey from one place to another can take a number of different routes, but will usually pass through a series of distinctly different landscapes. You don't necessarily notice when you leave one and enter another, but there are moments when you realize you are in a very different place. The transition journey is similar. You find that you move from raising awareness to noticing you seem to have created an organization that has different needs from those it had originally. And then later starting to think about what new businesses and infrastructure your community needs. Each stage is like finding yourself in a distinct landscape. And that's been very true of my own personal experience doing this work. I'm interested to hear how it may or may not resonate with your own experience. So I'm going to talk in a little depth about each of the 5 stages and also provide an example from Transition Sarasota so you can see what this actually looks like in a community. So the first stage is starting out. And I would say this is about trying out your best ideas and seeing what sticks.
That his absence would only be temporary. Mike McCarthy
if everybody could mute themselves when they're not speaking. We have a TV show in the background. Okay. So as I was saying, starting out is essentially about trying out your best ideas and seeing what sticks. This can include forming an initiating group, pulling together a small group of like-minded people who have the time, energy, and interest for what you're trying to do, at least to see it through the early stages of the process. Another very important aspect of starting out is reading the field, getting to know your community really well. getting to know what other organizations are operating in the same space as you, and how what you might be thinking of might be redundant or complementary to that work. And also understanding deeply your community's real needs and aspirations, and who your community is. At this point, we're beginning to raise awareness both about the monumental challenges we face at this point in history, as well as the many regenerative solutions that are already available to us. But not just in a way of downloading information on people, but actually engaging the early adopters and talking with them about, what interests them, where do they want to put their skills and passions and efforts, and to establish a base of support that's necessary to move into the deepening stage. So here's an example from Transition Sarasota. This is from a World Cafe discussion we did after a screening of the economics of happiness pretty early on. And in the first year, we offered nearly 100 public events on a wide variety of topics, and really heard from our community what they were most interested in before really landing on food, local food system development as the area where we'd most likely be able to make a very significant impact. So that led us into deepening. And I would say deepening is about strengthening the foundations for further growth. Not the sexiest stage, but a very important one nevertheless. And this is about focusing on what's working and letting go of what's not. Throughout the starting out stage, you are trying out things and seeing what's working and what's not. But at a certain point, you have to let go of that, which is not connected with people, to be able to focus on that which is. And establish a track record for getting things done. So not just talking about it, but actually going out in the community and doing practical projects that have real benefits for people's everyday lives. And not just getting things done, but getting things done well and being reliable, establishing a good reputation for your group. At this point, we might also create a formal organization, develop some structures and some processes for decision-making and conflict resolution, and hopefully practice effective collaboration. And begin fundraising to support our work, because eventually, as we get into the later stages where we're aspiring to do bigger and bigger things, we just can't do that without any money, without any staff, just on a totally volunteer basis. I guess some groups have done that, but it's very difficult with these larger projects. So a project that really defined Transition Sarasota in the deepening stage is our Suncoast Gleaning Project, where we bring volunteers out into farmers' fields to harvest the surplus produce and donate it to local food banks and the food insecure in our community. And to date, this project is now in its 11th year and has donated over 500,000 pounds of local organic produce. This really opened up a lot of doors for Transition Sarasota when people could see that we were really making an impact in this way. So that leads us into the third stage of connecting. And of course, we're connecting all along in this work. But here, we're actually able to start to reach out beyond the usual suspects, beyond the early adopters, beyond the choir, so to speak. Doing things like attracting serious media attention, bringing in a more diverse range of supporters, forging relationships with strategic partners, and even forming networks and coalitions, bringing together groups of organizations that are working on a similar topic into a coherent movement. And this is an example from Transition Sarasota. This is from our first Eat Local Week in 2011. It's now in its 10th year. And every year we work with dozens of partners to put on usually 9 days of different kinds of events, all sorts of things from farm to fork dinners to reskilling type workshops to film screenings and other educational discussion forums, keynote speakers, etc. And this is a picture of some of the organizers that very first year receiving a proclamation from our county government declaring Eat Local Week throughout the city or the county of Sarasota. So another very key strategic partnership there. So having gone through these first 3 stages, we get to a place of building. We're catalyzing systemic change, or we could say doing the big things that we came together to do in the very beginning, but didn't necessarily have the resources, the support, or the connection to pull off at that time. But now we do. And we can think and act more strategically. Before we had to work with the opportunities that were given, but here we can pick and choose a little bit more what's most needed for our community to develop in this way. Putting in place the infrastructure needed for a post-carbon society. A lot of this having to do with creating a new economic system and economic opportunities for people. Possibly facilitating community planning processes. This is a great place to do something like an energy descent action plan for your community, creating an alternative vision and a plan B, bringing together many people throughout the community to shape that. And running transformational, multifaceted campaigns, which could be things like a net zero community or a zero waste community, with many different projects and initiatives supporting that goal, all driving towards that goal. And with Transition Sarasota, one way that we worked to do this was through collaboration with the International Slow Money Network, really looking to drive investment in local farms and local food businesses in our community. So the 5th stage of Daring to Dream, from my perspective, is a little bit different. It wasn't entirely clear in the Transition Companion, but this is how I've interpreted it. Which is stepping up to national and global stages. And I think the way that we do this is by cultivating a thriving network of local initiatives and regional hubs and connecting the dots between them so that people can see that this is really a vast movement and that is really succeeding in helping to make people's lives better, creating a more just and sustainable society. And if we're able to do that to a great enough extent, we might be able to move transition to the center of our cultural life, to make it not an outlier, to make it part of people's everyday lives and part of our national conversation about where we're going as a society as we head into an uncertain future. If we can do that, we might have the ability to influence major policy decisions and ultimately change the course of history. And that's actually what we're trying to do with Transition US. You know, we're trying to build a movement that is big enough and thriving enough to really change the world. And growing the capacity of local groups is a big part of it for us. It's really the bedrock of everything. You know, it doesn't matter if we talk a good game, if this approach is not working in hundreds or potentially thousands of places across this country, we aren't going to get to where we need to. So That's just a little introductory framing for this conversation about how we might grow the capacity of our local groups. And now we'll hear from 3 local groups throughout the US, Cooperation Humboldt, Transition Town Media, and Transition Berkeley, about different aspects of this. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and pass the mic over to Tobin McKee of Cooperation Humboldt.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see your faces. Now that I'm a professional Zoomer, I have learned the benefit of taking a momentary break to breathe and relax. I invite everybody to close your eyes just for a second. And just take a relaxing breath. You could even stay there for a second. I'm going to read to you from The One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. You may have read that. Human beings with their tampering do something wrong, leave the damage unrepaired, and then when the adverse results accumulate, work with all their might to correct them. When the corrective actions appear to be successful, they come to view these measures as splendid accomplishments. People do this over and over again. It is as if a fool were to stomp on and break the tiles of his roof. Then when it starts to rain and the ceiling begins to rot away, he hastily climbs up to mend the damage, rejoicing in the end that he has accomplished a miraculous solution. Now we're going to talk about the ways that we stomp around on our roofs as we look at organizational structure and culture. And just to get us started here, I'm going to share the Cooperation Humboldt theory of change. 1 second to do that thing. What we have here is our resist, build, inspire, and empower organizational theory of change. And I'm just going to touch briefly on this to look at resisting all forms of exploitation and expression, build new systems that meet our needs, empower ourselves by learning the skills to succeed, and inspire others to join us in creating a new society. And I'm just going to use that as a framework for our conversation today. So coming back to Fukuoka's story, we can ask ourselves, how are we stomping around on the roof? How are we breaking the tiles and then congratulating ourselves for fixing the damage? And there are a lot of ways, obviously, that we're doing that. I'm sure you can think of a few off the top of your head, but what I'm going to focus on is organizational structure and the assumptions and the habits that we make building organizations if we don't take the time to really think that through. When we get together as a group with the intention of doing good work, we do good work, and we also spin our wheels in effective meetings. We get involved in unconsidered power struggles. I say unconsidered because then we can also consider power in the organization. We work until burnout. We do this and the roof gets leaky, and then we start spending a lot of time fixing the roof. And then I think if anybody has been in this world for long enough, you know that eventually the roof collapses because we're all up there stomping around. And so when we talk about resisting all forms of exploitation and expression, one of the oppressions that we're talking about is the white supremacist, cisgender, patriarchal, top-down approach to project management that we habitually use. And you don't have to be a straight white guy to do that. It is the dominant culture that we live in, and we are all both victims and perpetrators of that until we begin to resist it and build something new. And I'm going to drop a link for you in the chat. If you want to take a kind of humbling look at all of us, you can check out the amazing work of Tema Kuhn on white supremacy culture if you haven't already. There's a link to the whole website on that. It's fantastic stuff. And that's a resource you can use as you look at this organizational building. And then when we set out to build something new, unless we make a concerted and consistent effort to educate ourselves with things like this, and then apply what we're learning through an iterative like trial and many errors approach, then we're just going to regress to our familiar tools. We're going to talk loud to get our way. We're going to take charge outside the scope of our own work when things start to fall apart. We're going to quit projects that aren't doing well, or because we're frustrated with the way another person is performing or not performing. And I feel like we've all probably been there in some way or another. So then, like, knowing that, we decide, okay, this time we're going to do something differently. This time we're all equals. No one has any power. We're going to do everything by consensus. We reject hierarchy. And I think we all know where that ends up. We've all experienced the great tyranny of structurelessness, where nothing ever gets done because everybody has power and therefore the group loses power entirely. And to work on that at Cooperation Humboldt, we turned to Simon Mont at the nonprofit Democracy Network. I'm going to just drop a link to you. This is the article that I'm going to read from here. And you can connect more with Nonprofit Democracy Network as well. This is Hierarchy is Dead, Long Live the Hierarchy, where he introduces the concept of formal hierarchies. This is what he says. My favorite place to witness beautiful, clear, interdependent hierarchy is in small jazz ensembles. Different parts of the group defer to each other about different things, and this difference creates the space for expression and co-creation. Everyone defers to the drums and the bass for a sense of time, to the piano for harmonic progression, to the saxophone for melodic narrative, and to the song itself for the basic texture and structure. The deference persists even as they challenge and interweave with one another. And occasionally the whole thing will flip and suddenly the bass is carrying the melody. The fact that the saxophone defers to the drums for time and the piano for harmony does not limit the saxophone's autonomy. It creates the possibility for it. It's not that the ensemble has eliminated hierarchy. It is that they have created a rich network of interlocking hierarchies that enables them to coordinate equitably and creatively. So here we have an example of autonomy within a hierarchical structure. And I'm just going to share one more thing with y'all. Sorry for the sounds if you can hear that. Apologize. Oops, wrong one. Are you seeing different kinds of hierarchy? All right. So this comes from Simon Mont, but it's also what we're using at Cooperation Humboldt. And these slides are from Worker Owned Humboldt. So you will see some project-specific things having to do with worker co-ops, but this structure works for any group of people. And so here we have it divided into various kinds of hierarchies. And you can see like higher level hierarchies like strategic and policy hierarchy, and then lower level things like tactical. And what we have here is the drums, the bass, the saxophone, the piano. We have the mission and goals being decided by a group of people. But then we have the tactical hierarchy of the people who complete those tasks, enjoying the autonomy of the roles they create. I'm not going to go into this deep, but I'm going to suggest strongly that every group goes into this deeply. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And here, you know, we have our typical management structure with a board of directors, the CEO, and all these operations managers or committees or whatever. So this is the thing that we're used to, and this is also the thing that we reject when we reject hierarchies. When we go into a purely what we call horizontal democratic structure, then we get everybody having one member, one vote, like in a horizontal cooperative structure. That works with very small groups of people who work together and really commit to it. However, it falls apart for larger scale projects, and it can fall apart if the members aren't actually committed to it and educated about how to do that. We are not educated about how to do this. We do not learn how to cooperate, even though they say that in preschool. We haven't been doing it for many years since then. And then we can look at a sociocratic management structure. This is a modified sociocratic semi-autonomous circle structure that we use at Cooperation Humboldt. The study of sociocracy is broad and deep, and in some ways doesn't feel like it's in alignment with some of the values of a more holistically or person-centered organization. However, what we have here is a modified version of that. And so what ends up happening is that the board of directors receives proposals from the various circles when those decisions that the circle wants to make exist within the realm of hierarchy, which is the board's responsibility. And those hierarchies are defined and established and practiced and tweaked over time. So I'll give you an example. Right now, we are figuring out who should have power in terms of our volunteers and what kind of power they should have. And each separate group is coming up with different solutions for that, but then checking in with the board's overall strategic vision to make sure that we're not stepping outside the bounds of the power of our own groups. So I'm not going to take the time to go deeply into a sociocratic structure, but I will say that using this at Cooperation Humboldt, we have moved into a place where the semi-autonomous, that means the circles that are making quite a bit of decisions on their own, are also in excellent communication with the other circles and linked together as a whole to maintain cohesion within the whole organization. And what this does is it distributes power equitably without falling into the tyranny of structurelessness. It means that folks who come on as volunteers do have some power in their projects, which is really, really important, and a pathway to leadership in those projects, and a restriction on that power so that they can't start mucking about breaking tiles on the roof in a completely haphazard way. And a deep dive into the specifics of how this works takes years. And that's the main point that I'm making here. If you want to grow your capacity, it is worth taking the time. I would say even it is necessary to take the time on an ongoing basis to build new, carefully considered organizational structures to replace the ingrained, habituated ones we've been indoctrinated with since birth. And what this looks like is time spent studying, not just reading, but discussing. That means setting aside time for your group to talk about these things, and not only theoretically, but actually sitting down and making policy decisions, writing this down, drawing it out. That diagram that we presented is the agreement that we have made through study and discussion as a group. And other things like semi-annual strategic planning, and that's not to discuss projects or tactics. It is to discuss the structure and to look back in a retrospective way and say what worked and what didn't. And in this way, we come to that empower ourselves with the skills we need to succeed. And that literally means an ongoing organizational culture. So the takeaway from this is to commit as a group, as an organization, to spend real quality time on a continuous basis on the project of building your organizational culture and structure. The tendency to set aside that whole project when you're involved in real projects is really strong, but if you formalize the organizational development process as a project, then eventually it becomes inherent as part of what you do. And I'm speaking from experience here. We are now beginning what we're calling Cooperation Humboldt 4.0. That is to say, our fourth iteration, our fourth formal restructuring, where after 2 years of ongoing study, practice, and evaluation, I think we can actually say that we are breaking fewer roof tiles than ever before. And I'll finish on that humorous note.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tobin. Lots more to be said there, obviously. We will have time for questions after all of our panelists present. So do take note down of any questions that are coming up for you. And we will also have breakout groups to explore this with the presenters, these topics in some more depth. Great. So we'll pass it on. I think next up we have Transition Berkeley and Linda and Bonnie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Currie, and Bonnie Borucki and I are the co-directors of Transition Berkeley in Berkeley, California, which is located in the San Francisco Bay Area, right across from San Francisco. We're about 110,000 people here in our town. So I'm going to be giving us a little snapshot of our history of our organization, just to give you a feeling about us. And then Bonnie and I are going to each share a project, some of our recent projects that relate to how we built successful partnerships with our local government, schools, and other nonprofits to create and fund community-based projects. So with that, we have a slideshow to share. Let's see, I'm looking for it. I had it right here, so just bear with me. Okay. Is that? So can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So this is us. It's not advancing.
Might just need to click on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So this is just this is kind of the spark of how our group got going. There's a lot of groups and a lot of activity going on in Berkeley, lots of organizations that are doing all kinds of great work. But on this particular event in 2010, it was part of the 350.org Global Work Party. And some of us said, well, what are we doing? What is our town? Are we doing anything collaborative for this work party? So the city helped us find this location, and we got to work transforming it from just nothing in a very busy intersection in a part of town with not much going on there in terms of green space. And we planned, and we had this work party with about 75 people coming. It was pretty impressive. So that day there were probably 30 or more other things happening on the grounds activities. And at the end, we had this beautiful celebration with our mayor speaking and Julia Butterfly Hill speaking, and everybody was really jazzed. It was a great feeling. So that space that I showed you from the beginning, which was just a blank slate with plastic sheeting underneath, became this just amazing pollinating, wonderful garden for people to enjoy, and people at the bus stop and all of that. So from that experience of trying to organize events, several of us in the city decided that it was time. We had heard about the transition movement and the activities in Albany that were happening close to us. And so we decided that that it was time to launch this effort in Berkeley. We thought it would be a way to weave the various efforts and groups together. So we formed an initiating team, and we started doing projects. And this was one of our early on the ground projects that we started at that time and we're still doing to this day. We meet at a local park once a week from June to September, and people bring food, crops, news to share, and we always have local musicians playing, and it's just a beautiful time at the park. Oops, let me go back. So at the end of that park, so once you do one project, you start imagining like, well, what else could we do? So the end of the park, there was a similar space there as the first planting party that I showed you, but much smaller. It's the entryway to the park, across from the transit station, again on a busy street. And so we had this idea to make it into a native plant garden. And after talking with the city for roughly 2 years, they did agree to let us make plans. And then this is the work party from making those plans. They're Cal students. Here's a snapshot of our progression. You know, Don just shared the steps. And so we kind of roughly have gone through those steps, launching in February 2011. And then from there, collaborating with lots of different local groups, doing hands-on projects, joining in 2012 the Climate Action Coalition. And then finally in 2018, we decided it was time to become a 501c3. So with the help of one of our board members, we did that. And we, for the same reasons Don talked about, we really wanted to do bigger projects and we didn't have funding to do it. So we sought grants and got them and started to do these other projects. And we just keep asking, what if we could do more? So there's the native plant garden. It doesn't quite look like that right now because they've done a lot of construction, but this is how it continued to look with volunteer care. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie Borucki, and she's going to tell us about this other project we have going.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and thank you, Tobin, everybody for joining today. So I'll talk about Bee City Berkeley. That's one of our funded projects that we did in partnership with Berkeley and UC students and Berkeley Public Schools. You want to advance the slide, Linda? Okay, so in around 2019, 2020, we met with these students. The CalPERG group on UC Berkeley campus had been so enthusiastic, they made UC Berkeley campus an official Bee Campus USA through the Xerxes Society. And they wanted to go bigger. So they had this ambition of making the city of Berkeley a Bee City USA. So we met them through one of the parks commissioners, and our journey began. Do you want to advance, Linda?
Sure.
So these are the project steps for the pollinator gardens, and coincidentally, they kind of match the steps that Don went through. It really wasn't intended, but I think they sort of do. We started out. We met with the parks commissioner and director and the CalPERG students and developed this idea, found there was a lot of enthusiasm there. But we did have to convince the park directors that actual citizens could do this. There was some skepticism about liability issues and leaving it and not maintaining the project. So the second step was maybe deepening. We went ahead, we decided how could we create a proposal to install 4 pollinator gardens in the city. We applied for a chancellor's grant through UC Berkeley, partnering with the CalPERG students, and looked for parks and public schools in the city, parts of the city that really needed this green space. As Linda, you saw before how we established some of these relationships already in the city. So that was a great grounding for this. Okay, so we started connecting, and after we received our money from the grant, we actually had 2 grants. one from the Chancellor's office, and another from the Rotary Club of Berkeley. So this whole process of reaching out to the sites, picking the particular sites, the garden teachers, the park commissioners, that was that process. So number 4 aligns with building. We held these volunteer work parties. We had to find our volunteers, going through all the work of developing these gardens, and also creating educational signage at these gardens. And then the daring to dream. Yeah, we have the bees and butterflies arriving at these gardens. So I'm going to take you on a short tour of some of these garden sites. This is the Malcolm X Elementary School garden in South Berkeley. The CalPERG students were really excited to be able to work with elementary school students. Here you have them doing a native plant seed packaging project. So we worked with the garden teacher, students, community members to work together on planting these native plants. Okay, Linda, next slide. Education was a really big part of this project. So there was funding to create the signage. I worked along with one of the CalPERG students to select the plants and the bees, the native bees and butterflies that came to these plants. So we installed really good quality signage. And when the students came back to this is a Berkeley Independence Studies site, and they came back in the fall and they were so excited to see these pollinators showing up, and the teachers loved to use this as a teaching tool. Okay, next slide. So working with the parks was a little bit different process. We had to go through very stringent approval plans for the types of plants that we planted, and they were concerned about liability issues, but we worked through that. To the left, you see the Rotary Club. They can't, besides giving us funding, they also supplied a lot of our volunteers. And the other volunteer group were neighbors, friends of Strawberry Creek. Next slide. Our last pollinator garden on this tour is the San Pablo Park Garden in South Berkeley. You can see one of the volunteers, Anna. When this garden was started, we did the sheet mulching, we planted the plants, and the first to establish the plants, we had volunteers come 3 times a week. Now it's down to 1, but that was quite an effort. And now you can see that we have monarchs, monarch caterpillar, showy milkweed, and it's just a joy to see people stop and look at these plants. Okay, next slide. Last slide. These are some of the lessons we learned from this project. Start with a small project that is very visible. Find that community energy. What are people interested in? Engage a variety of partners. Find some way to cover the project cost through grants, donations, building those relationships of trust and fulfilling your promises. Very important, number 6, thank your partners and volunteers. Yeah, we sent out letters to them many ways. Food, we fed them at the events. Okay, 7, leave room for the next steps. And we're really happy to say the City of Berkeley is now coming to us, asking us, when are you going to put in the next gardens? So it's been a very successful partnership. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. So now I'm going to jump for the next few minutes and talk about another project that we've had going for a few years now. The idea of, instead of sending stuff to trash, why don't we help fix? Why don't we find a way to fix? So we started this repair cafe project, and did I skip a slide? So with this project, I think I skipped a slide. How do I go back? Oh, here we go. Here's a rough overview of our steps. You know, we all influence each other, and we got total inspiration from this woman from Pasadena who had been a transition member there, who moved to the Bay Area And Transition Pasadena had been the first group, I think, to start Repair Cafe. So we got really psyched up from her. And then we just started talking it up, and we ended up meeting Vita Wells, the Culture of Repair, Peter Mui, and all these people helped us along the way to actually have a first Repair Cafe in 2018 with support of some of those players. So we were encouraged from there to apply for grant funding from Stop Waste, and we got it. And then we hosted 3 repair cafes that following year, continued to apply for grants after that. And then now we're doing, we moved into repair training, which is really teaching high school students how to fix things. So I'm going to give you a little tour. This is one of the Transition Berkeley Repair Cafes that we partnered with the Berkeley Adult School on. And their principal and staff helped host. They gave us space, and it was an amazing experience. 85 people or so came, 30 to 40 repair folks, and lots of volunteers. We switched up the locations so that we could experience having them in different parts of town with attracting different people. So this was at a place called The Place in Oakland, and it was smaller, but they had this great workspace, and they allowed us to be there for a small donation. And then this is our last Repair Cafe of 19, where we partnered with the UC Berkeley Cal Zero Waste, again, using UC Berkeley Chancellor's Community Foundation grant money, and super successful. Like almost nothing was trashed, almost everything was brought back to life. 100 participants and about 50 volunteers. So now I'm just about to end. You see I'm going over time a bit. So now during COVID, we had plans to do a repair training, because we realized that young people don't have repair skills, and we really wanted to include them in our repair cafes. So we developed a training, also using UC Berkeley engineering students during COVID this last year. And we hosted 12 online sessions, all on repair. And it was very well received. And the students said they would definitely fix their stuff, try to fix it versus trash. And they would take the course again if we did it in person. So that's our plan for 2022. So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this transition plenary, and we're happy to answer questions later. There's our email. We have a Facebook page. So I'll turn it back to you, Dawn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda and Bonnie. Yeah, each of these groups, as you can see, could easily do a 2-hour workshop by themselves. So we're just kind of getting the tip of the iceberg here, but we will have some more time to talk and get more depth. All right, so our last presentation for this evening is going to be Sari Steuber and Martin Pepper with Transition Town Media.
Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, super. So I'm going to kick it off. My name is Martin Pepper. I've been with Transition Town Media for around 10 years now. Sari will walk us through the second piece, and I will kind of wrap it up with the last bit of this. So first of all, I want to thank Tobin, Linda, and Bonnie very much indeed for their for their introductions, and Don for kicking it off. And stage 5, you mentioned daring to dream. And that is such an important part. That's where the real things start to happen. And there was another comment made around finding the community energy in one of the other talks around that. And that is so vital, because every community is different. Every community kind of has a different sort of feel and a vibe to it. And I also very much like Tobin's comments about, Cooperation Humboldt 4.0 about breaking fewer roof tiles. What we have been doing at Transition Town Media now for many years is an annual planning exercise. And we've dropped and broken plenty of roof tiles along the way. Or as Winston Churchill would say, men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most pick themselves up and hurry on as if nothing had happened. We try to, when we see the truth, when we try to see good things, we try to make them better. So what we have developed over the years is an iterative improvement on what we're doing, and fundamentally, taking the Daring to Dream theme, really the question we've been working on is, how do you dare as a group? And also critically is, how do you get commitment and action to achieve results? That is such a vital part of this, because we've certainly had our planning sessions where we thought we had everything right, and then it really didn't tend to happen. A lot of things just never sort of materialized, and we came back to it the following year scratching our heads and saying, basically, what did we get wrong? But also, what did we get right? So this is really the iterative type of process that we've been building. I will also say that when we talk about strategic, a lot of people tend to think of 5-year plans, like the Soviet era 5-year planning and so forth. We really do our planning on a 1-year basis. We find it's sort of the sweet spot for how we're trying to make things happen. It also fits in well with the calendar. It's not too reactive, but it is good that we can continue to change. And really, so much of it is around energizing and inspiring people with what we do. So what we have within our group and we're sharing now is a process that we've developed that's very much a how-to as to how we go about doing it from year to year. And the last couple of years, it's been pretty static in terms of how we go about doing it and how we get commitment to action. And we feel that we have something that may be of value to others. And of course, we welcome folks taking what we've done and seeing if they can apply it to their situations. And if it's useful, please use it. And if you find better ways or whatever, please go with it. Every group is different, and every piece of, what we do is different. So with that, I'll hand that over to Sari to carry on the next part of the talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I am Sari Steuber, and I was one of the co-founders of Transition Town Media back in 2009, and have been in the midst of things ever since. The annual planning meeting that we do is actually one of my favorite events of the year, because it's really the time that we kind of bring together our tribe and connect with other people in the community and really start acknowledging and inspiring each of our members to really make their dreams a reality. So now I'm going to start taking you through our process step by step. You might notice that I'll go through more than half the steps before we do any actual planning. And but this is where the energizing, inspiring, connecting, and community parts come in. And as we all know, foreplay is very important. So we've learned, sorry about that. We learned early on that people are more likely to come to the table if there's food on it. So we feed everyone breakfast, locally roasted, fair trade coffee, homemade scones supplied by Martin and his wife Jen, fruit and other goodies. So people get fueled up, they get a chance to settle in, and they spend a little time chatting with each other. This lets people know that they'll be taken care of here and that their presence is really important to us. Then to start off, we go around the room and give everyone a second to tell us their name, any affiliations they have, why they're here, what dreams they came with. We want everyone to be known, to feel like they belong, to get that the perfect people are there today. People will start to connect with the notion that there are real people in the room, a community that they can be part of, with powerful dreams that can be realized with what we do today. And now we create the space that we'll be working on. We do a grounding meditation to center ourselves, to quiet the noises in our minds, to let other concerns drop away so we can focus on the task at hand. We also acknowledge where we are, that this was and is a sacred space. We acknowledge the Lenape tribes whose land we inhabit and honor those who have come before us. We acknowledge that there's much work to do to repair the injustices that they have suffered and continue to suffer so that we can exist here. Still setting the stage, we then include some kind of fun activity to get everyone interacting, moving around, excuse me, moving around a bit so that we're not just sitting all day. One example was when we had these little pots on each table and had people plant seeds in them and then later take them home to see them grow. So we had a little connection to the future. And then getting close now, to give everyone a sense of what's possible, we do a quick year in review, touching on everything we accomplished in the last year. Often it's quite impressive to reflect on how much we did accomplish during the year, and it always inspires us to look to great things in the coming year. The review is followed by an overview of what the transition movement stands for, to remind ourselves why we do what we do and what end goals we're working towards. Now, to get the juices really flowing, we do some kind of visioning exercise to spark our imaginations. One year we had a beach ball, if you can see that in the far left corner there, that was painted with a world map, so it looked like a globe. And we stood in a circle and tossed it to each other. When you got the ball, you spoke a wish. We did 4 rounds, focusing on something you wanted for yourself, for your family, then your community, and finally the world. And then we start brainstorming. This is just round 1, starting with the high level big picture stuff. So we asked everyone to write down what their favorite takeaways were from the visioning activity, what dreams were triggered, what ideas really called to them. We invite people to connect with their passion, to do what they're driven to do, to see what the changes that they want to see in the world. And then we break for lunch. So we supply a good healthy lunch from a local restaurant, so we support local business as well. And we do another activity to get people engaging with each other even more. One of our favorites was when we provided greeting cards addressed to each person in the room, and everyone was tasked with writing a note in at least 3 cards, acknowledging those people for who they are and what they do. At least 1 card had to be for someone you just met that day, which of course meant that you had to make sure you met someone new and got to know them well enough to write something meaningful in their card. At the end of the day, each person took their card home and read the notes at their leisure. So it was a really touching way to finish the day's work. And one of the most inspiring parts of that exercise was that several folks took it upon themselves to make sure that everyone had at least a few things written in their cards so that everyone felt seen and acknowledged. And now it's time to get to work, and I'll turn it back over to Martin for the nitty-gritty part of the day.
Thanks, Sari. Thanks very much. So Shari's really nicely outlined. You know, we entertain, we inspire, we feed, and we sort of build our community and connections in this process. It's also very helpful for us as we're doing this because, you know, we have people in the group who've been with the group for many years, and we quite often have relative newcomers. We quite often have people from other organizations that come and actually observe the process to see what they can learn from it and take away. And so a lot of those exercises prove that as an organization, you know, we're very much serious, and we kind of live, you know, we kind of live the values of our organization whilst we're doing the work. Now, during the the lunch session, what comes out of the late morning session are a terrific number of ideas. You know, it's always amazing how creative people can be, and how many ideas flow out of this. And so one of the challenges that we've struggled in previous years, you know, before our new method, as it were, was that we had a lot of trouble trying to pull all that information together. And if you're trying to organize it whilst you're trying to have the meeting, it absolutely sucks the energy out of the room because it becomes very technical, it becomes very dry, you're trying to make things happen. So what we also do during the lunchtime sort of recess, as it were, we actually have 2 or 3 volunteers that are actively taking all of the sticky notes from the morning and organizing them, so that when we start the afternoon, we already have a good sense of the organization, you know, around the main categories, around the main themes that we're hearing, so that we can kind of structure the afternoon in a far more ordered fashion. And if we don't do that, what we find is that people want to continue to ideate. And at this point, we're really past the ideation stage, and we're really into the okay, where is their energy? You know, where is the you know, where's the community energy within this? So so what we do is, Maureen, if you could advance the slide, please. We organize everything into a series of categories, and what we normally do is we build those around our main groups that we have within the organization. You know, we have inner transition, we have local economy group, you know, we have local food and so forth. And so what we do is we take the ideas that we found from the morning, and we place them in those broad categories, so people can kind of see which group, you know, where there's a lot of ideas. It also helps align with folks who are already within those groups, or have a preference for doing that kind of work. And we find that's extremely helpful for people to kind of get a closer sense of what it is and where the ideas are, at least. The next thing that we do, and again, this is a key kind of moment for us when it comes to rubber hitting the road, is that we have to know that there are a sufficient number of people interested in a particular idea that actually want to do it. So what we actually do is we basically have sort of a rule set, where we give each person some stars. We usually hand out 2 yellow stars to each person, and they can put those stars against an activity that they can organize. So they're kind of the sort of responsible person. We add 3, we give each person 3 green stars where there are the participants in the exercise. And then we also give each person 5, you know, sort of also round stars, so that they could put a star there to say, well, I might not be wanting to do all of the work for it, but yeah, I would certainly be interested in maybe helping organize the event on the day itself, or cleaning up after the event, or whatever. So that's really a nice way to limit people, so they're not volunteering for everything and then they get scared and run away. But it's also a great way of seeing where the energy really comes from, and you know, where we're actually going. And then what we do at that point is we look at those ideas and we see where the stars are. There has to be a yellow star for a particular activity, in other words, an organizer, for it to really make the cut. And we really have to have at least 2 more participants, because we're firm believers in the power of 3, to sort of say that this activity can move forward. And we basically, you know, prioritize what we want to do next based on where the energy for the community is, you know, what that actually looks like. And then as we're nearing the end of the meeting at this point, what we really want to do is we really want to agree a follow-up. So what we do with that is essentially we're following and setting up, and our only ask is that the organizer of that activity sets up one follow-up meeting with all of the participants who showed an interest, that they get together and that they agree what they're going to do with it. And sometimes we find that they don't want to do anything further because maybe the idea is just too big, too difficult. Maybe they don't have enough skill sets to get it done. And that's okay too. Because what we do within our organization is we try a lot of things. And a lot of those things aren't terribly successful, you know, or maybe it's a do once. And a few of those things, like, for example, the media free store, or, you know, becomes a breakout success. So it's okay to fail. We allow people, and we don't really call it fail. It's okay to try it. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, that's okay. There's plenty more things that need to be done, plenty more ideas, and we can move on. And then really at that, that's how we do it. And then we close the meeting. We usually start at around 9 a.m. in the morning, and we're usually done by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And that includes the food, you know, and the community and the fellowship that goes with it. And we find that's a pretty good sweet spot. It gives people most of the afternoon to go home and obviously and to read the cards and things. So that's basically it. And thank you for listening. Back to you, Don.
All right, thank you so much, Martin and Sari, and also to Maureen for doing an excellent slide share. So at this point, I want to take just a few questions. They could be about one of the individual presentations or this topic of growing the capacity of your local group as a whole. And you can, best way is to go to reactions in your main Zoom toolbar and click on raise hand. That's the easiest way for me to see you, and then you can just ask your question directly. You can also type into the chat if you feel more comfortable that way. All right, so we'll kick it off with Marissa.
Thanks. I think Pat actually had their question in the chat first.
Oh, okay, well, we'll go with them first then. So Pat asks for media folks, who is invited to the strategic planning your annual meeting?
Well,
Sari,
yeah, I'll go ahead. We invite, first of all, we invite all our current members, obviously, and many of them come. We also put out a notice to the community at large, and particularly the people that we often collaborate with. So, for example, at our last meeting, we had a number of people from our Media Borough Environmental Advisory Council join us, and it ended up with we have partnered with them on many things before, but this particular year we managed to partner with them on a zero waste project that went really well, and also a street painting party, which we just finished, which was really great. So yeah, we have a lot of community interests as well. We've also invited other transition groups. In fact, one year a group came from Lehigh Valley, which is a good hour and a half to 2 hours away. A team of them, and they actually did kind of their own mini strategic planning session within our strategic planning session. It was really pretty fun. So yeah, we invite everybody we can.
That's great. And how many people typically attend?
Usually around 30 to 40, somewhere in there.
Thanks so much. Let's go back to Marissa, and then I see Mark in the static.
My question was about livelihoods. It'd be great to hear from each of your groups, because I think you all have different models and views, orientations around creating jobs for people doing this work. So if you just wanted to share about that a little bit, what's your your organization's orientation around transition livelihoods for the organizers? How's that going for you?
Well, I certainly believe that one of the things that we do for all of our members is that we can all learn from one another and get better. and that we can do better in our regular careers and sort of day jobs, if you like, as a result of this work. So I definitely emphasize, skill building, reskilling and sharing, to help people feel validated. We do have some, paid volunteers with our organization now, and that's proven to be, extremely successful. And some of our ideas, for example, the Solarize project that got picked up by Solarize Philly is now employing a very large number of people actually within the city of Philadelphia. So we are trying to create economy, with our local business initiative and the Circle of Aunts and Uncles. We're trying to fund sustainable projects and so forth. So we one of our biggest things is getting across the message that we are pro-business, pro-local business, along with being pro-environmental, and that's certainly a message that we have to work on, given that the Pennsylvania is relatively conservative in general. Thank you.
And just to follow up with that, we've tried a number of times about with paying some of our volunteers to do the work that frankly nobody really wants to do, and so we've been having trouble getting people to make those kinds of commitments. But beyond just getting someone to actually do the work because we pay them, we really feel that paying people for the work that they do is a real indication of the fact that this work should be sustainable and that people can make a living working at these kinds of jobs. So we really value supporting people to do the kind of work that we really need done.
Great. Yeah, I see that Bonnie put into the chat that any funding we have received for coordination on projects has been through grants. I don't know if either of you from Transition Berkeley want to speak any more to that.
Linda, I guess I will just speak on that. Yes, that was a really controversial issue. In the beginning of our group, we had some members who really didn't believe that we should operate with any money. But in order to do these things, we need money. So our time is valuable, but it's only been through writing in some coordination time through grants. That's the only way that we've really found. But Linda, I don't know if you have anything else to say on that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we've only been a 501c3, a nonprofit, for a short time. And we haven't done any real fundraising to date, other than a garage sale and donation-based projects. So I think we're going to look towards different models. But in the grant writing that we have done, we have always made sure that there are stipends available for even like the Cal students, some of the repair coaches that helped us this last time. Some of them, they do some of these things for a living, or they work for a nonprofit. We made sure that they received funding as well. And I think that's just really important. I mean, I don't know where this repair training project is going to go with the schools, but like sort of my big picture vision is that it becomes incorporated into that school and all the schools, and maybe there's like going to be a thread of funding there. It's tricky, but I think Tobin probably has a lot to say about this, so I'm excited to hear from him. Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah, well, the mission of Cooperation Humboldt is to build a solidarity economy on the North Coast, and that includes transition style initiatives, but it's also very much about the economy in general from a broader perspective. And so we have a wide variety of funding streams. We have about 40% of our income is from donations. We have another 30 to 40% of income that comes from grants. And that grant funding is expanding from foundation grants to things like county funding. And then we also have fee for service. So we're paid directly by the Small Business Development Center for our cooperative development projects. We're paid through trellis funds for our cannabis cooperative work. And now we're paid directly by the city of Arcata for our community health worker project. The other side of it is that in our semi-autonomous circles, they're really seen as self-funding startups. And so those passionate, committed individuals work as so-called volunteers, although we don't use that word, we just call them core team members. And they put in that unpaid labor, but it is the same kind of unpaid labor that a small business developer would put in building something that is going to be self-funding. And we have success across the board for all of our projects becoming self-funded in one way or another. So we inoculate that idea into new project groups as they start to say, like, this will be unpaid in the beginning, and then you'll develop your funding stream from there.
Great. Thank you all for your answers to that. I think that, yeah, there is still some hesitancy around fundraising and paid staff in our movement. Some of those concerns have to do with how money has been a corrupting influence in our society for thousands of years. But I think we can learn how to apply our values to how we work with money. And I think y'all are doing that great in different ways. I do want to take one more question for the panel before we move into the breakouts and go a little deeper. And that's from Mark Judeman. So I wonder if the panel might want to comment on what they think is the most important key to the longevity of their organization. Any question?
For me, I would say it's with our group, it's about, fundamentally, it's about having fun. And I mean that, in the same sense that the World, Happiness Index is calculated, which is being in the groove, feeling that what you're doing is productive, feeling that what you're doing is meaningful, and really making people feel empowered is what I think is bringing them back, but also having fun in a fun way. We have parties, we like to celebrate things with one another. We have a pretty good sense of humor in the group. We're not above, having some fun and, with one another and joking around in some of our meetings and things, and not being too formal. And I think those are all important elements of kind of building a culture that make people want to come back.
Great. Would anybody else like to speak?
Sure.
Tobin?
We have these slogans that we use. So one of them is forming, storming, norming, and performing. So, let's do it. Let's get together. And then storming is inevitable. And that is where there's confusion, where there's disconnect, where there's enthusiastic members who drop out and new people who come on, blah, 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 blah. And so forming, storming kind of oscillates back and forth for a while. It's not like step one, step two, step three. You form, you storm, then you reform, then you storm again. Then you start to normalize, and then everything falls apart and you storm again. And then at some point you start performing, and then things fall apart and you start storming again. And if you remember that and you live through the storms, then things start to really build. We don't have enough fun, Martin. But I think that resilience during the storms is probably one of our strong points.
Awesome. Anybody from Transition Berkeley want to chime in?
Yeah, I would like Bonnie to share too, but I think from my perspective, I think our power structure feels pretty even. It doesn't feel hierarchical, even though Bonnie and I call ourselves the co-directors and we're managing these projects. Other people are managing other projects, and we have a real appreciation for each other. And I think each person is getting a chance to do things they're passionate about. So I think that's working. And we kind of, not that we never have conflict, but I think we're on the same page as far as gratitude and as far as kindness. We keep bringing that up in our community events too, that that's our base. Like, we're coming together in kindness, in generosity, and everything kind of should come from that. You know, our communications, we want the people, we do these big things at the parks, and people come with different expectations, and there's different groups of people. And with COVID and masks and no masks, like there's been some interesting experiences this summer, but I think we keep consistent with that. And that seems to give a good vibe for our group itself, which has been together a pretty long time. And it also attracts other people to sort of that general feeling of good feeling. So I'd like to hear from Bonnie too, and see what she has to say.
I think making connections, like a lot of the events that we have, the repair cafes, the crop swaps, we used to have movie nights. It was just an opportunity for people to connect on some and find out they had such similar ideas. So it's building community. And I guess keeping that community going sometimes, I mean, we live in a place where there's a lot of transients in Berkeley. And so, yeah, it is a challenge keeping that consistency. But yeah, I'll just say making those long lasting committed connections.
Yeah, I think all of those things are extremely important. You know, having fun. If it's not fun, it's not sustainable. Nurturing those relationships, you know, having everybody feel very valued, realizing that there are going to be stormy times, and that actually, if we can get through them together, we'll be stronger. Having lots of places for people to plug in. And I would just add, having a sense of momentum in an initiative. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from the legendary Bob Dylan, "He who is not busy being born is busy dying." And I think that's true of social change groups as well, because, you know, we know that the challenges are huge and that we don't have a huge amount of time. And there's so many millions of things that people can do with their time. If they don't feel like this is at least on a trajectory to where it can have some kind of real impact in the world or in our local community, I think that people start to get bored and start to kind of drift away from an initiative. So always keeping that sense that we're always kind of taking the next step, looking over the horizon, daring more greatly in some way is really important, along with all those other things. So at this point, we're going to break out into groups, I think, for about 20 minutes. And you can go deeper with any one of these topics. So we'll have a room for talking about structure and leadership with Tobin of Cooperation Humboldt. We'll have a room for talking more about partnerships and fundraising with Bonnie and Linda from Transition Berkeley, and a room to talk about strategic planning with Sari and Martin of Transition Town Media. I will be staying here in the main room to answer any questions about the 5 stages of transition and that kind of overall framework. So I will open the rooms in just a moment, and you can actually choose which room you want to go into. I think you'll be able to move in between rooms as well. You'll need to click on the breakout rooms icon in your main Zoom toolbar, and then hover over the group you want to join, and maybe move your cursor around if you're not finding the join button, and then you'll be able to do that. You can't see it yet, because I haven't opened the rooms yet, but I will in just a moment. All right, so we're all back. I know that was way too short a time. It always is at these things, but I also don't want going bleary-eyed, staying up on a Zoom till late hours of the night. So we have about 10 minutes left here. We will be able to continue this conversation on our Regenerative Communities portal that I assume you all are on now. There's a space in there, and I'll put the link into the chat for this session under main stage events. And the recording will be uploaded there. If you missed any part of this, you'll be able to see that. Go back and see that probably sometime tomorrow. And we can continue this conversation and continue asking questions and learning from each other on this important topic. So I want to give each of the presenters maybe about a minute to give any kind of final remarks, maybe inspired by some of the questions you got in your breakout, some of the points that were raised. And then I'll just say another word or two at the end before we break. So maybe we could go in the same order that we presented. That's all right. Tobin going first.
Sure. One of my favorite things that somebody drew out in our breakout room was I ended up saying, if you want to expand your what we call intercultural communication rather than diversity in intercultural collaboration, then instead of saying, hey, we're doing this great project, would you like to join us? You look at whatever group that you'd like to connect with, and you find out what they're doing, and you say, hey, how can we help you, and take guidance and leadership from that group to establish that relationship, having nothing to do with your project or your agenda, but really putting use to your time and your privilege in that way. So that was something that I thought was really valuable that came out of our conversation.
Great, thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, particularly if your group contains a lot of people of privilege and you're trying to work with a group that's been historically marginalized, you got to build trust there, and that trust is built through service and relationship. It's super important. And Cooperation Humboldt's done amazing work around that. All right, let's pass it over to Bonnie and Linda for any final remarks.
You want to start, Bonnie, or?
Sure. I'll just say the word I'm thinking of is cross-pollinate. That we just need to create these pathways and basically go out, find who needs help, as Tobin just said, and what our skills, what we can give to the communities and support each other.
I think, yeah, having conversations, having places where we can just talk and share is really good. It's really, really helpful. Every time I'm in one of these, I write down, I'll scribble down all these notes. It's like, I'm going to follow up on this and I want to do that. And most of the things we've done in our group have come from, everything is from somewhere else. And maybe we've done a twist on it. But inspiring each other is really important. And so we had some great conversations about next steps for possible projects and collaborations. That's all I have. Yeah, it was good. It was fun to meet people. Well, they're all from Colorado, or no,
New Jersey.
From Colorado.
Thank you.
All right. And over to Martin and Sari.
Oh, we had an interesting conversation too. We were, first of all, we were joined by Rita, who was actually a main participant in all of our annual planning meetings. And she thought it was very interesting to find out what actually was the thinking behind our whole process, because it never really occurred to her why we had built it that way. And so it was kind of neat to enlighten her on the reasonings or the intentions behind it all. We also had a gamer join us and talk about the importance of making things fun, and how much easier it is to tackle something complex and even scary if it's done in a spirit of fun. And then Laura was had a few questions to see how she could put this together for her group as well. So it was a very fun little breakout room.
Yeah, one of the, thank you, Sari, and I agree with all of that. One of the other things was that one of the people made a comment, oh, well, we haven't really done much. And I was like, well, yes, you have, and don't underestimate what you're doing, and don't try to compare what you're doing to others, and don't see the material result of something that you've done as the only thing that comes out of it, so that to me is, over the years that we've been here, so many people have joined our organization, are in some way maybe connected to it, but have maybe moved on to other activist work that they're doing in other areas that they feel called upon to do. But they still know what we are. They still know what transition is. They're still a person, or a resource, somebody that we can call, contact, make connections, form links, and so on. So much of what we do is far more than just the actual projects that we complete, but it's what we do in the minds of the people that we interact with, and not to underestimate that, and not to try to compare yourself to other groups, and just to start somewhere, because that's where we started, and we've just tried to puzzle it out and try to keep going and trying to get better as we go along. And the expression I use is, we reserve the right to get smarter, over how we do things. That's it. Thank you, Don.
Great, thank you so much. Just in closing, I want to give a few disclaimers to the 5 stages of transition, which I probably should have done at the outset, but I'll do here at the end, which is, we've always said from the beginning, there is no one right way to do this work. It's important that we don't rush the process. That this is an organic process. It's about starting where we are and evolving from there. So it's not about judging ourselves or we're not doing enough. We can actually create lots of problems when we get too up in our heads about this, that there's a right way to do it, that we're comparing ourselves. But I do think that this, these times are calling us to, stretch ourselves a little bit and see what is that next step, what is that next level that we can take it to. And I think all the presenters here tonight gave a little piece of that answer, some kind of tool, some kind of perspective that hopefully you can use and take forward with you. And last thing I'll say before we all unmute and say goodnight is that look out for a course that's coming in early 2022. There's been a group of about 10 of us that have been working on a self-guided effective collaboration training that we plan to launch in January, February. It goes through the stages of group development that Tobin referred to earlier, the forming, storming, norming, and performing, and looks at issues like setting shared purpose, working with conflict, facilitation and meeting skills, and evolving the group over time. So we hope that will be a tremendous resource. It will be free to members of all transition groups, available at minimal cost to others and give you a really good overview of that topic, as well as a community of practice to continue learning with. So with that, I'm going to switch back to gallery view, so you can see everybody's faces, and just welcome you to unmute, and we can all say good night to you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
you.
Take care.
Especially the people who's late, it's much later.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Don, Marissa.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.